Auzubillahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. This is Ghazala Amin with lecture number 4 in PRM700 series for MS in Project Management program. We've gone through the first 3 lectures, and I think the next 2-3 lectures again will reiterate some of the same messages that we've been conveying. And I'm hoping that by this time the lingos of project, the project management, the reasons will be getting a little bit clear. I'm hoping that we would be clarifying a little bit of those concepts for most of our students. So let's get started. We will actually be in a little bit more of a repetitive mode before we get into the more details of it. So for the next 2-3 lectures, I'm hoping that you're absorbing whatever we are saying, because the dialogue or the conversation that is going on, the message that we are trying to convey is very important for the students who are enrolled in this program. One of the main reasons of being in MS in Project Management program is definitely the need to understand why project management, and then the concepts of project, program, sub-projects, sub-tasks, and the work breakdown structures subsequently will keep coming in, and I'm hoping that we will be able to convey all those messages through this conversation. Today is lecture 4, and we will be focusing on the project management processes and the framework of project management. Project management framework and integration. When you talk about the word integration, it is how are you going to bring together all the processes of project management. The key definitions that we talked about in the last slide, or in the last 2 lectures, we'll talk about, let me repeat myself a little bit more so we understand those concepts. The key definitions that we provided to you were the accountability. Accountability, the word accountability means acceptance of success or failure. The word responsibility. The word responsibility in project management means the owner of the task, the person who will be responsible for executing that particular task. Assignment for completion of specific event or activity or task. Before I get on to the authority piece of it, responsibility is usually not a project manager's task. Responsibility is the subsequent team members who are responsible for doing the work, but somehow it could also be the project manager responsible for maybe in a smaller project setting up or scheduling of a meeting or facilitating of a team meeting. Usually the project manager is never responsible for facilitating sponsors meeting, because you would always need a third party or more of a secretarial kind of or administrative kind of a person who's taking notes and making sure that everybody stays on track. In a team meeting environment, in a smaller project, the facilitator is usually the project manager himself or herself. So I'm hoping that the word responsible and accountable is fairly clarified through this conversation. Okay, let's move on to the word authority. Authority for all of you should be considered, it's the right of an individual to make necessary decisions required to achieve his or her objectives or responsibility. So it's the designation, it is the title that is given to you. It is also considered a legal abiding situation that gives you the authority to sign documents for that particular task. Power and authority cannot be intermixed. Authority, while is a legal title that is given by the organization to you, power is couple of things granted to an individual by the subordinates. It's always usually your peers or people working for you, not the people that you are working for. The people who you are working for do not give you the power. They have the power to give you the authority, the title to carry on some of those activities. Power is always given to you by your subordinates, people who are working for you or people who are working with you. Again, this would be the time to actually talk about the upward communication, the downward communication, and the lateral communication, that diagram that was given to you in the last lecture. And more importantly, power is a measure of their respect for a particular individual. So two things. It is given to you by your subordinates and peers, and one thing that is missing, it's always given to you over a period of time. You cannot expect to come in, walk through the door with a particular title or authority and gain power. Respect is not instantaneous. Respect is given to you over a period of time when people actually evaluate what you are capable of. So let's understand the concepts of accountability, the responsibility, do not intermix those, and then the authority and the power. Rose with any other name would probably smell the same. So when you talk about the project, different definitions are given to the word project by different methodologies, by different situations. So let's talk about a couple of things that you need to understand and underline in this particular slide. That a project is always temporary, ongoing, monotonous, repeatable, in a maintenance mode is not a project. Project is temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product or service. Word temporary and unique should be underlined and should always be present for any situation to be called a project. When you talk about the PMI's definition, the Project Management Institute's definition, that is the definition given to the word project. Operations such as manufacturing and projects differ primarily in that operations are repetitive and ongoing, while projects are unique and temporary. Hence, in the earlier lectures, the subdivision of industries that were project oriented, that were on the lowest ebb, was the manufacturing plants unit or manufacturing units, and then on top of it, while the arrow keeps going up, the epitome of project management, the industries that are at the top level, were, it could be many, but according to my understanding at this point in time, is probably Department of Defense, and then we use NASA as an example because it's so closely or so importantly follow the principles of project management. And couple of reasons why they are, because it's the need for effective and efficient implementation of projects. It has to be done right at a certain point in time, at that particular instant. Hence, the need for implementing project management processes. Whenever there is a need for effective and efficient implementation of all the tasks, and it is so important to have it delivered on that particular time frame, in that particular time frame, within the budget that has been allocated to it, you do need to implement stringent monitoring and controlling processes that maybe project management can offer. So that was the PMI's definition, the couple of bullets that we talked about. ISO, International Standard Organization, also has a definition for projects. It is a unique process, again the word unique, consisting of coordinated and controlled activities with start and finish dates to achieve an objective scope conforming to specific requirements, including constraints of our triple constraints: schedule, time, cost, money, and they have the word resources, and resources could mean several things. It's not just the human resources, it's also using the same terminology that was used in other lectures, the 3M: man, material, and machine. So if you see that no matter what methodology, no matter what organization that you are following or your industry is following, the definition of project stays the same. They always put a bound, making sure that the cost, time, and requirements of the customer are met. So that was project. We talk about program. A group of projects managed in a coordinated way to obtain benefits not available from managing them individually. So program comprises of smaller projects or tasks or subtasks. Successful implementation of project is one of the necessities of a program. However, coordination of those projects is the responsibility of the program manager. A program is inherently more complex than a constituting project. It has a broader scope and may require extensive coordination between its various constituting projects. The importance here is not just the successful implementation of project, because typically and traditionally that's the responsibility of the project manager, obviously. A program manager has a bigger offering or bigger task to deal with. He or she deals with coordination of those projects. Typically, a program manager cannot wait for successful ending of each project to begin the program or to get the program rolling. Most of the time, several milestones of individual projects within a program are linked together so that one milestone of project A is linked to milestone number C of project number B. Those are interrelated and interlinked, and managing of several projects is the duty of a program manager. The third bullet talks about a project results in the creation of an output and is then ended. You start a project, you create a unique product or service, and it's terminated. When you talk about a program must integrate and maintain the operationality of that output for a specified period of time. So if you look at that little diagram on the bottom of the slide, it's the program X, and all the little projects A, B, C, D, E, and F are feeding into the program. A good example at this point in time would be, let's assume a program is to supply clean water to village Tandu. Any name. It's a hypothetical name, of course. Many projects will be included in that particular program. Some that come to my mind or would come to your mind would be digging of a well, laying the pipes, putting the faucets, connecting to the main water supply 300 miles away, bringing in it, fitting the pipes, These are all individual projects being executed by different people or by different project managers who are responsible for successful implementation of each one of those projects. We did each one of those projects, however, if they are not interlinked properly, and there is not an oversight of a seasoned program manager, you can dig the well, the pipes can be fitted, you can start, everything goes well. We were missing one piece that was sadly missing in this whole concept, could be the time coordination. You start off the supply from the main water line, and the pipes that were fitted were still not glued properly. Hypothetical situation. You start the main water line, and what happens here? Flooding. Unfortunate situation. This is the simplest example that can be given to you to understand why different projects have to be coordinated and timed properly. And hence, if you look at the succession of experience that is needed to move from being a project manager to a program manager, or to become a senior program manager, or becoming an executive or a portfolio project manager, these are all different layers which needs more experience, more training, more education with PM processes before you actually get to the next level and to the next level and to the next level of project management. Chota sa quote hai, let's think about it, talk more about it later on. Project management is primarily about leadership, integrating work occurring in all project areas. So even within a project, integrating different areas of work, steering the project in right direction, and effectively managing stakeholders and complexity. एक बेचारा project manager और ये सारे काम, मगर project manager is the karta dharta of the project. Everything that is going around you, you are dealing with, not only dealing with issues, conflicts, motivating your resources, getting them to be in an operational state at all times. It also means that at the same time you are managing the stakeholders' expectation, keeping them so close that they don't stray away from being available when you need them, but then again keeping the right distance so that they don't start interfering in your day-to-day activities of managing the project. One of the most important conflicts or issues that a project manager can deal with is too much micromanagement from your upper management, from your organization, or from the customer itself. As a project manager, we are also responsible for keeping that safe distance, of providing the right information at the right time to keep your sponsors, your stakeholders, your customers included in the stakeholders, and your parent organization, and to give them a comfort level that you are providing them enough information and that you are going in the right direction. If you do that, then you will be left alone to manage your project in the way that you envision it to be. So hence the word project management. Now comes the definition of project management. We talked about project, program, and now project management again. It's the application of knowledge, skills, tools and techniques to project activities in order to meet or exceed stakeholders' needs and expectation. Two words, meet and exceed. It will not be possible for any project manager or a program manager to exceed your stakeholders' expectation. However, one thing that we need to try and strive towards is at least meeting all those expectations. Surprise customer is never a happy customer, something that we all need to realize. You have to keep your customer informed of the activities and the progress. An informed customer is usually always a happy customer, because when there are issues that you will run into it in a project, you will be able to get the support of your customer in resolving some of those issues. Project portfolio. Again, I used the word when I was talking about the promotion and the progress of an individual within the field of project management. I talked about project manager being a program manager, a senior program manager, overseeing many programs, and then something called portfolio manager. So what is a project portfolio? The project portfolio is a set of projects which an organization is undertaking. Projects usually differ in their type, complexity, cost, time requirement, risk, level, priority, and the list goes on. Multiple projects that you're seeing on your screen right now. If I take example of the Sydney Olympic Games, one of the bigger programs, and let's assume what went on over there. These are all different projects, events, venues, facilities and accommodation, one project, the transportation, the media facilities and coordination, the telecommunication side of it, the security arrangements, the medical care, the human resource and volunteers. And that is another project, and if people undermine managing volunteers, sometimes a lot of volunteers can create a lot of chaos, and actually instead of trying to help, they can be the biggest distraction in execution of a project. Cultural Olympiad, pre-games training, the IT within the Sydney Olympic Games, opening and closing ceremonies, the public relations, the financing, the test games and trial events, and sponsorship management. And I'm sure there will be many more projects within this program. The Sydney Olympic Games 2000 was a highly complex project. Everybody understands that. We just had the London Olympics, which comprised several distinct work areas, each of which could be considered as sub-projects in their own right, and which all had to be integrated and coordinated within the framework of the overall Olympic project. This is just an example. I could change the name to any other, the 2012 Olympics, the 2004 Olympics, or the 2008 Olympics, and the 2016 Olympics, right? Can you imagine that the swimmers are all ready to go in? They go in, they start swimming, and the LED that is actually capturing or displaying the seconds or the minutes recorded of their swimming lap does not work at that point in time. Or the advertisement is put in at the wrong time. The music blares at the wrong time. The sponsors not coming in. The transportation not showing up to pick up the Olympiads from their hotel and bringing them to the venue. There could be security lapses. In this world that we are living in, I would pull the unexpected security violations to that, because that is not something that we as project managers can plan. However, everything else can be planned to some extent. And as project managers and program managers, it's important to understand that you do plan out some of the situations that you're aware of. So yes, a security violation can be planned out to some extent. And if it happens, what are the mitigation plans to correct it? So, one of the wonderful examples of a program with multiple projects and how they have to be interlinked for each of the tasks or each of the games that are happening. For swimming, they have to be interlinked. For basketball, it has to be interlinked. For weightlifting, for gymnasium, these are different activities that are going on over a period of time in different venues at the same time. Actually, it could be happening at the same time in different venues. All this has to be linked, and there will be 1 or 2 program managers overseeing all of this, while you have project managers making sure that each of these boxes are run without any glitch. So, important thing, let's talk about some things that project management involves. We talked about the word project management, and so a project management can include, but is never limited to, change management. Think of any project which does not have any changes to it during its lifetime, and your answer will be a no. There can never be a project with no changes in it. And a project manager's job and role is to accept those changes positively and make it beneficial. Then, the important aspect of project management that we briefly talked about is communication management. The statistics or the numbers that were given to you was 95% of a project manager's time is spent communicating. Importance of communication in a project is multifold. Then you talk about deliverables management. Multiple deliverables, interlinked, predecessor, lags, leads, these are the terminologies that we will get to hear. The human resource management, one of the most crucial in a project manager's life, the role or the task is dealing with human resources. It's very funny because when you deal with human resources, your predictability or the unpredictability of human resources can vary between times, can vary between individuals and situations. The person that you would claim to be least predictable can actually turn around and deliver you the most crucial task on a timely basis when you need him. How to deal with human resources, how to motivate them, and the reason why you have to keep them motivated all the time. All the reasons and justifications need to be clear in a project manager's head at all times. Project priorities need to be clear in a project manager's head at all times while executing a project. Quality management. The word TQM, the total quality management, why is it so important? Since 1960s, the improving the existing processes in a project has become very crucial. And the reason why I'm using 1960s is probably after Second World War, the importance and because we were moving from the world of invention to the world of innovation slowly and gradually. But at this point in time, we are very minimally in a world of invention. We are in a world of innovation. And somebody very clearly defined the terminology, the difference between invention and innovation. The difference between invention and innovation is invention plus commercialization. So you can invent new things, but if you give a twist of commercialization to it, it becomes an innovation. That means you're ready to sell the product to a group of people who are receptive or ready to accept your product. So While the human race continue to exist, we will continue to invent things. But the major invention after the Second World War of TVs and phones and radios and cell phones and theaters and high definition and smartphones, I think we are in the world of, if there's a market, if there's a demand, if there's a need for it, I will make it. But I need to be able to sell it to make more money, right? So hence my differentiation of invention versus innovation. Then the word risk management. Project management is nothing without managing risks. Identifying your risk, documenting your risk, looking through the consequences and coming up with a mitigation strategy for those identified risks. If we talk about the constraint management, the constraints of a project, the financial and cost management is something that is ultimately the project manager's responsibility, along with a finance manager, depending on the size of the project. Sometimes the project manager only has authority, the word authority, to deal with the hours that are going into the project, but those hours translate into the cost. The monitoring and control of those activities, once you are in the execution phase of the project, you have to manage and look very closely to what is happening, how is it happening, how did I plan it versus the actual happening of your tasks. Customer relationship management. And now, right now, I'm not talking about stakeholders' expectation, because stakeholders are many. Your customer, the person or the organization or the persons who have approached you or who have given you the authority or the title of the project manager to lead and execute the tasks, to deliver what they expected from you. Managing their expectation is one of the most crucial aspect of project management. And the list goes on and on. If I go on, it will fill up several slides of things that I can think of that are involved in the field of project management, and each one of them has a very critical slot in a project manager's life during the execution of that project. Talked about project stakeholders. The definition of project stakeholders are individuals who are directly or indirectly involved in project deliverables. Part of the project organization responsible for the project. So the organization that you are working for, that is responsible, or you are getting your paycheck from that particular organization. They are responsible for the project. Hence, they are a very important stakeholder in the life of the project. Individuals that are positively or negatively affected by the project. Think about the word negatively. And the only easiest example that I can give you right now is when we are automating certain things, there is a probability and a possibility that some employees will be laid off in that situation. So while you are making your process more effective and efficient, the use of human resources to execute that task lessens. So if 10 people were working to produce a certain deliverable, after the implementation or after the successful implementation of the project, that number could be reduced to maybe 5. The 5 people who will be moved around, I hate using the word laid off or terminated, or moved around, will be the negative stakeholders who would bear the consequence of improvement of the process. And if the whole negative can be put into a positive spin, we'll talk more, we can think about those 5 individuals can be promoted to do bigger and better things, right? So there's not always a necessity that there will be negative stakeholders in any project. If you're building a road or if you're building a highway, recipients of benefits by acquiring during the procurement of the land can also be a negative stakeholder or a positive stakeholder, depending on how much benefit they received out of it. Project stakeholders would include, and this is very, very limited group of people or group of stakeholders, project manager and project team members. These two and the performing organization are directly involved in the execution of the project. So they are the direct stakeholders. Customer also being one. Sponsors, the end users. Now these are the direct stakeholders of a project. Indirect stakeholders could be many who could gain benefit in the long term, or indirect benefits. So for example, a highway was laid down and somebody later on comes in and builds a little restaurant. He's an indirect stakeholder and a positive indirect stakeholder because of that particular project. No matter what you do, a project manager should create an environment, always create an environment in which project stakeholders contribute frequently and appropriately. The word frequently and appropriately are important because it kind of deals with making sure your customer is at a hands away distance, that when you need your sponsors or your customers or your parent organization for support and in time of need, they're always at a calling distance. But again, what I talked about in the previous slides is you do not want a situation where your project is micromanaged by everybody else other than yourself as a project manager. An important concept that a lot of people, when I talk about it and I ask the definition of a sponsor, because we use the word sponsor in relationship with provision of money or finances, we tend to use the word sponsor as anybody who gives you money. That is not the definition in a project management world. Sponsor in a project management lingo is the upper level management. It has to be upper level management, so it is upward communication. That provides guidance and also controls effective use of customers' money on the project. Sponsor की एक और definition है जो इस वक्त इस definition से clarify नहीं हो रही है. Sponsor is responsible for making sure your project is always steering in the right direction. So when there are hindrances, sponsor, being the upper level management, always is looking for positive implementation and timely execution of your project. And whenever there is any hindrance, he or she will support your project and give it a little push. So in a lot of situations, your file is stopped somewhere, your machine is on the dock, you cannot get it released, a new version is coming out in the market, you need a little bit of more money to bring in more technology or get an updated technology. Your sponsor should be out there to support you in those hours of need. He or she is responsible for making sure that you meet all the triple constraints of your project as a project manager. The time and the cost to meet the original requirement or the intended requirement of the customer. The performing organization is the organization which typically the project manager belongs to. So if I am an IBM project manager, IBM will be the performing organization. If I am building a road and I work for NHA and my responsibility is to build that M2 highway or the freeway, then NHA will be the performing organization. so on and so forth. Performing organization is typically where the project, or which organization, whichever organization the project manager belongs to. A very important picture, if we can, and you will see this picture over and over again. The project life cycle. Project life cycle is the, just like a human being's life, is the initiation, moving into different phases, and then terminating and closing at the end. Throughout the life cycle of the project, you do work on team development. Your project team is the essence of your project, and you have to constantly and continuously motivate them and resolve conflicts with them, and making sure that they have the right skill set and they are trained to appropriately execute the tasks. Along with that, managing of the project human resources. The bubble up there continues from the beginning to the end. Within the life cycle, if we divide our life cycle just the same way a baby is born, you become a toddler, you move on to become a teenager, then your productive life, I'm not saying that the teenagers are not productive, but the productive or the working life, getting older. Same way, a project life cycle is divided into 5 groups. It's the initiation, it's the planning, implementation or the execution, monitoring and control of those execution tasks, and then the closure. While those process groups are working, there are several bubbles, there are several activities or milestones that are going on. In the initiation phase, you're organizing your project. So all of your organizational skills, being methodical, those terminologies that are related to being successful in a project management situation, are all put to use in the initiation and the planning phase. You come up with the work breakdown structure. The work breakdown structure actually is the set of tasks that are going on. Then you take all those tasks and you schedule them appropriately. That's called the project scheduling. When you schedule those tasks appropriately, under the execution and the control phase, you have the project monitoring. And then another bubble is controlling, I wouldn't say just controlling of meetings, but controlling of communications. And last but not the least is a project closeout. I cannot lay enough emphasis on project closure, and we'll talk more about it. So while those little bubbles are spread across the different phases of the project, one thing that continues to go on throughout the life cycle of the project, from initiation to the closure, is the change and the risk management of your project activities. Different changes will come in. Different risks or risks that were identified as low risk could become medium or high risk, or can actually create hindrance in your project, and it has to be dealt appropriately. Another thing that starts from the beginning and goes on till the end of the project is the contract and the customer relationship management. Customer relationship management, because they are providing you with the resources, or they are responsible for providing you with the money so you can actually make progress on your project. They have a very important role in success of your project. Make sure that you manage that relationship appropriately from the beginning to the end of the project. The PM processes are divided into 5 phases of process. This is a very important slide and should be highlighted. The arrows have a very, very important place. Initiation processes, only you start off the initiation process and you move on to the planning process. You spend a lot of time under the planning process. From the drawing board, you move on to the execution of those tasks. Execution and monitoring and control go hand in hand. While the execution of the tasks are going on, you have to monitor and control, making sure that the planned versus the actual happenings are in sync. Any variances that are happening at this point in time need to be documented, need to be controlled, and put in the status report so it can be dispersed effectively throughout all the stakeholders, so everyone has an understanding of why certain variances exist, if there is a plan to get back on track, or it would eventually lead to the delay of any of the constraints, either needing more money, more time, or missing some of the original or intended scope of the or requirements of the project. If you see any of those variances, and now you have a game plan to get back, either to get back or implement those changes, you go back to the planning process. Hence that arrow that leads from the controlling to the planning board or the drawing board of the project. And the cycle starts again. If you can meet the variances without any changes in the original plan, or without any, I would not say without any changes, because there isn't any project without any changes, but managing those changes appropriately and everything is taken care of at this point in time. From the controlling, you move to the closing process. Those arrows are of extreme importance, and all of you who are listening to it needs to identify and highlight this particular slide, so you understand the movement between, or the interaction between the various project management processes or the phases. While we're talking about all this, the important thing is the professional responsibilities or the ethics that I talked about in one of the lectures, and how important it is for a project manager to understand that, stand on his or her own two little feet, and continue to work and report in a very, very ethical manner. In PMI also, professional ethics and professional responsibilities of a project manager are highlighted as a separate area, which is of a great concern and of very importance. It's of a very big importance. So we, all of us intending or who are in a project manager situation, need to understand that all tasks, no matter how critical your timeline is, or you can find an easier way to get around a certain task by adopting some of the measures which cannot be put under the professional ethics, or getting commissions or getting kickbacks from the customer or the subcontractors, that is not the right way to get the work done or get the work going. Professional ethics is of big importance in this whole project management processes area. The 5 project process groups. Let's start. We talked about the interaction in the last slide. We can talk a little bit about the definition of each of those phases, and then we'll get back. Maybe we can do a quick glimpse of that bubble or the interaction to understand more about the interrelationship. The first one is the initiation. Initiation is the definition and authorization of the project or phase of the project. Initiation is the first phase of the project. So assume birth of a child, a birth of a concept. The customer or the sponsor sees the need to create a unique product or service. Typically, the marketing group or the project manager is assigned to understand. In the initiation phase, you only get to work with the customer to obtain an understanding of what the customer's needs are. We put it all together. At this point in time, you have minimum of human resources working on this project. The initiation phase is typically 1 or 2 human resources working on a particular project. Is a feasibility study of the project, trying to understand what the customer wants. In the project management context, the feasibility study should have been done by the customer organization prior to approaching the project organization for actually coming together and working on that product. But sometimes there are loopholes and sometimes there are holes that they find out later in the stage when they actually have acquired the services of a project manager or a project providing organization. So at this point in time, you're working very closely with minimal resources, along with working very closely with the customer to obtain an understanding of what their needs are. You haven't done, there is no resources, there's no time for you to actually go do the planning at this point in time. So we put it all together in a document called a project charter. The charter document can have various names, and we'll talk about that later. But at this point in time, you go out and you work as a business analyst. You work as an analyst, you go out, have meetings, work with the different team members of the customer's organization, get all the details that you can get hold of pertaining to your project, and put them together in a relevant document or in a relevant space. That is the initiation phase. When you put it all together, the customer organization gets a glimpse of what is needed and they sign up for that, or in a very rare situation they may decide not to proceed further. At this point in time, even your organization will have an access to all of the information that is needed, and they can also make a decision whether to go ahead or not to go ahead with the project. If all goes well, from the initiation phase you move into a phase called the planning phase. You will have access to more resources than whoever were available in the initiation phase. You refine the project goal, scope, requirement, etc., and you as a project manager would have an opportunity to develop a master project plan. Planning is the most significant phase in a project manager's life in a particular project. A lot of responsibility is put on your shoulders, using the word responsibility. Along with team members, you will be estimating, you will be creating tasks, and you will be coming up with the solution to provide the product or the service to the customer. The use or the provision of resources continue to increase in the next phase. The next two phases are the implementation and execution of the phase and the monitoring, evaluation and control. In the execution phase, you bring together all the required resources to undertake the project in accordance with the master plan. So the use of the resources is maximum of human resources, and all other resources are the maximum in this particular phase, where you're actually getting your hands dirty and you're actually getting the work done of what was, or of the work done that was actually planned in the planning phase. While the execution is going on, you are monitoring and evaluating and controlling all those activities. And repeating the word variances, trends, planned, what was planned versus the actual. Monitor the project to identify and assess shortfalls and variances and initiate corrective actions if needed. This is the phase where you're actually providing status reports. You're going through your initially identified risks. You're monitoring any changes, either initiated by the customer or your own project team at this point in time. And if there are any corrective actions that are needed, what do? You go back to the planning phase, according to the slide that was shown to you earlier, and you go through the implementation, execution, and then the monitoring and evaluation control phase. Last but not the least is the closure phase. It formalizes the acceptance of the project output by the project customer and brings the project to its end. The word formal is very important. And if you look at some of the definitions and some of the lingo of the project management world, the formal and legal go hand in hand also. Formally means the signing authority, legal, binding. So the closure phase is actually a sign-off by your project customer. And if you've kept the project customer very close or at an appropriate distance and have taken the customer alongside during the execution phase and monitoring phase of the project, that customer would be more than happy to sign off your end result. A happy, aware customer is usually the best customer during the closure phase. And that is why a surprise customer, no matter what you give him or her, is usually never a satisfied customer because it comes in as a shock to them. The closure phase of the project also brings the project to its end. If all goes well, the closure phase is the best phase of the project. Sometimes during the initiation phase of the project, like I said, is also a lead on to your own project organization, whether you want to take up the project, continue with the project, or decline at that point in time. At that point in time, initiation can lead to an ultimate closure. That means some of the closure tasks need to be quickly done to close out the project, depending on how many resources, the resources being not just the human resources but also the material and the machine from that aspect. So even though in the interrelationship you don't see that arrow going from the closure to the initiation, but sometimes initiation leads to a direct closure of the project if the project organization does not see a mutual benefit between the customer and the project providing or the project execution organization. We will take a look at the last slide one more time and reiterate the movement of it, movement between the little processes. The initiation process is all of the information coming in from the customer, minimum human resources provided or minimum resources provided by the project organization, minimal only to get all of the information that the customer can provide, put it all together in one space or one document, have a common understanding between the customer and the project organization, and do a quick sign-off of a document which is called the charter document. Once everybody is satisfied from between the parent, the project organization and the customer organization, that it is a mutually beneficial situation, we move on to the planning process. Within the planning process, the project manager spends the most time thinking and evaluating and estimating with a little bit more resources. They move on to the execution process, which has the most resources. Controlling and execution go hand in hand. If there are any variances or changes, the controlling process goes back to the planning board or the drawing board. The cycle continues. Once there's a successful implementation of those tasks, we do the closure of the task and hence a successful completion of the project. Hopefully that you have understood the different phases and the most important concept, other than the definitions that were provided to you this time. The five processes or the phases within a project life cycle was the most important concept given to you through this lecture. I hope you understood it. Would like to go down, understand the definitions and the use of resources by the customer and the project organization within each of the phases. I hope you're following on and enjoying some of the concepts that are given to you, and also having an opportunity to read through some of the reference material that are provided to you in the beginning. I wish you best of luck and happy reading and continued education. Allah Hafiz, and I will see you in the next lecture.